So if you're on today, what we're here to talk about is self-determination. And like I said, a year ago, we presented, I presented with Family Voices about a program that was kind of in a trial. They called it a phase-in, where there was a small select number of individuals that were allowed to participate so that the state of California could kind of learn how the program works and hopefully work out some of the kinks. And I think if I'm honest, I'd say we're still kind of working out the kinks, but I am I think that we're in a better place than we used to. And so I'm here to just give you some updates about that. And for those of you who weren't here last year, this will be an introduction to self-determination, so never fear. And yeah, so anyway, let's move on here. So my name is Chris Wecks. And I own a company called Abound Services. Abound Services is a self-determination company. Since last I spoke with all of you, I've assisted about 100 individuals through the self-determination process. Before that, I had about 10 years of experience as an institutional advocate, I used to call myself, which just meant you might have heard of a special ed advocate or an advocate assisting with Medi-Cal. I just kind of did the gamut of public agencies. And so it was just kind of whatever the need arose with someone in question, I would help them with that department. And so when I learned about independent facilitation, I was really excited because a lot of those services can kind of get folded into the role that I have. But most importantly, I am a parent of a regional center client. And so really my story here and who I am starts about 10 and a half years ago when, one dark rainy night, my 2-month-old daughter was found to have a rather large brain tumor. And the blurry years that followed with surgeries and chemotherapy and hospital visits and eventually social services, different agencies, learning how to advocate for my daughter's education because of the complications from treatment and learning how to navigate different systems. That's really why I'm here, is my daughter and everything that we've been through together to get her to where she is today. So yeah, that's who I am. And now I just want to learn a little bit about all of you. And we didn't practice this, Allie. I meant to bring this up. Are we able to do a poll?
Unfortunately, not this time around.
Okay, that's fine. And I'm sorry I didn't bring that up previously, but depending on who you are, this information is going to probably hit you differently. But if I were to guess, you, the listener, is probably going to fall in one of these categories. So you are either someone interested in self-determination, or because you yourself are a regional center client, or your loved one is, or you work for the regional center or the Department of Developmental Services, or you maybe are a staffer or a committee council member with the State Council of Developmental Disabilities. You might work for a financial management service, or you yourself might be an independent facilitator, or there's a range of other people. These are all the acronyms that that we love to use in self-determination and in the state. And so if you're one of these people, this is really an introduction to self-determination, and I hope it's helpful for you. So what we're going to do in a minute is I am going to give you some definitions for all of those acronyms and a few others. But the most important definition I am just going to put here alone, which is, what is self-determination? Self-determination is a radical change to traditional regional center services. So if you are a regional center client or your loved one is, this is something that you may or may not be interested in. It might be something that you want to do and it might not be. And as we go through the slides, I hope you listen carefully and evaluate if this is something for you. But the succinct kind of working definition for today that I laid out here, I will read out loud, though I promise not to read all of my slides out loud. Self-determination is an alternative to traditional regional center services through vendors, empowering regional center clients of all ages to manage their own budgets, hire and fire their own staff, and find their own unique supports to meet their vision of their preferred future. Self-determination is often described to rest upon 5 principles, and it really is an instantiation of these principles in a way that extends the law that underpins regional center and other services like it in the state of California. So the 5 principles of self-determination that you see here are really kind of the philosophical underpinnings that guide all of what we do inside of self-determination. The first pillar that you see here, support, is really about the kinds of supports that individuals have. And it's really a confirmation of the fact that individuals ought to be allowed to choose who and what they have to support them in their life. And this is true of everybody, that the people that we want to support us in our lives ought to be things that we choose, that we have the freedom to choose. You see here confirmation. Confirmation is the principle that individuals who are most affected by the system, those with developmental disabilities, those who need supports from the system, ought to play a significant and central role in changing the system, in making the system what it is they think it ought to be. And that's one of the principles that I love about Family Voices so much, is because they are so much about family-centered and family-driven activism and advocacy at all levels in California and in the US. Authority. Authority is the third principle of self-determination. And it really is the principle that an individual ought to be allowed authority to choose what services and supports they have in their life, what they want in their life, what they don't want in their life. A lot of people in self-determination opt out of certain types of services, feeling like those services are intrusive or just not exactly the right fit for them, what they want, and giving them the authority to choose that, as well as the authority for the finances that underpin all of that, which is a really big difference from the traditional service model. Responsibility. Responsibility is sort of the flip side of the last pillar that I'll describe in a minute, but responsibility, the inside of self-determination, you will be given a budget and you can run out of money. It's possible. You also have responsibility legally to make sure that you're spending funds in line with what the program's intentions are. And a lot of that responsibility traditionally given to regional center service coordinators, social workers, case managers, that's now given to you inside of self-determination. And then lastly, freedom.
Chris,
yeah.
This is Allie. I'm going to jump in really quickly. We've heard that there's a little bit of background noise that's making it difficult for the translators. And so I just wanted to let you know and see if there's a possibility of reducing that a little bit so that those who need translation can get the information.
Yeah, of course. Let me see if I
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Just try and turn my fan off. Maybe that's the source of something. I don't know. But I'm pretty quiet here in the back room now.
Thank you.
How is that?
Hi.
Is that better?
Hi, Chris. My name is Oscar. I'm your interpreter for Spanish.
Hi.
Hi. Do you have a microphone? Some sort, just a very simple, headphones with a microphone in the cable?
I do have a pair of Bluetooth earbuds. Maybe that will help.
That
so
would
let me
probably
try
help.
that.
Yes. That would
That's going
help.
to take.
And also, if you can get into an area, a space where there is no background noise, that would help.
Okay, it's fairly quiet here, so
Okay.
I'd like to think that's not it, but I will.
Thank you.
Let me try and activate these Bluetooth headphones. I normally have it paired to my phone, so it'll just take me a moment.
Thank you. And also, if you please be mindful to not go too fast.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Slow down. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
A little nervous. You know how it is trying to give a talk like this.
Thank you so much, Chris. We appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So I've just gone through 4 of the principles of self-determination. And then the fifth one. The fifth one is probably the principle that we're all most familiar with if we have any appreciation for self-determination going into this. And that's freedom. And freedom is really just the freedom to design a life of our choosing. We all want this. We want the freedom to love who we want to love. We want freedom to choose what career path we're going to take in our life. We want the freedom to, our educational paths. Freedom to control what's going on in our life is a key tenet of the self-determination program, and the program seeks to maximize individuals' ability to participate in the construction of their own life, in their life goals. So,
Chris, I'm so sorry. This is Pip.
Yeah.
Would you mind going back to your full view screen where we can see one slide?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's perfect. Just so that it's clearer, easier to read.
Yes.
Thank you.
There we go.
I know we're demanding a lot of you today.
Technical difficulties. I'm having a little trouble with the Bluetooth headphones, and with my screen maximized here, I'm pessimistic that I'm going to get it to work, but I will try and speak slowly and stay in this quiet little room, and hopefully that suffices for today. So, but I'll continue to kind of play with it as I can here. So this is a definition, a working definition for self-determination, and you might see other definitions. But this is in the ballpark of what self-determination is essentially about. It's about giving individuals the support, the confirmation, the authority, the responsibility, and the freedom to direct their own life, including the services and supports that they want in their life to help them make that life happen. So there are a range of different definitions here, and I don't want to waste too much of this group's time. I want to give time for questions. So while I will run through these definitions quickly, what I'd like all of you to do, if you have the ability to, is to open a separate tab and type in this link. It's bit.ly/SD definitions. And that will just be a simple web page with the definitions that you see here so that you can reference them later if you need to. Nonetheless, there are quite a few dense acronyms that I know none of us love to see across a page when going through concepts in self-determination. And I just want to make sure that you understand that there are a number of major agencies that are involved in major definitions that need to be somewhat well understood when you're approaching self-determination. You should know that the major agency that is behind the construction of the regional center system, as well as the self-determination program, the agency responsible for that is known as the Department of Developmental Services, often called DDS. And then if you're listening to this, you're probably affiliated or a client of, or at least know about a regional center. And there are 21 of those in California, serving individuals with developmental disabilities. So regional centers will be the primary agency that you'll interact with when going through the self-determination process. But regional centers and the laws that govern how we support individuals in California who have developmental disabilities are all really guided by a single law passed in the 1970s called the Lanterman Act. And the Lanterman Act is a very profoundly positive law, a law with far-reaching impacts, including the law itself governs the self-determination program. The Lanterman Act is the law that says that people with developmental disabilities in California have the same rights and responsibilities guaranteed to everybody else in California under federal and state laws. And it also charges really the Department of Developmental Services and regional centers for advocacy for and protection of these rights, including the right to access community services, which is a big piece of what we'll be talking about soon. Many of you who are affiliated with regional centers might be familiar with vendorization, and that's the agencies that you can access right now through a regional center in the traditional system. Many of you might be frustrated with the number of vendors that you have access to, or the types of vendors, the types of supports that you might want in your life or in your loved one's life. Vendorization it's a challenging process for companies to go through and to maintain. And so there just aren't enough of those. And although regional centers have done their best to try and secure as many different types of services and vendors as they can, everybody's different. And finding that little niche service provider that's going to meet your needs maybe just hasn't been a part of the history of regional center vendorization. So we'll get into that. An individualized program plan you see here it's an action plan that regional centers write every year or sometimes every 3 years, depending on your age, that describe an individual's challenges and disabilities. It's often a rather clinical document, but it does identify some services and supports that would be helpful for that individual to be more independent and to participate in the community, which are some chief goals of regional centers. And then what you'll see next, a person-centered plan. A person-centered plan is similar to an IPP, and it's something that we do at the start of most self-determination processes. But it's more open-ended, it's more comprehensive. It describes not only an individual's disabilities, but their strengths. It describes their preferences for their future. And it describes a range of potential supports and, community connections that an individual either has or wants in their life that may or may not correlate to anything a regional center would traditionally provide. It's a thoroughly person-centered plan, as opposed to the traditional IPP written by regional center service coordinators and case managers. Almost done. So the State Council on Developmental Disabilities is an important organization to know about. It's established and it exists in a completely separate organizational chart from the governor of California and all the agencies below him. The State Council is an advisory council, and it offers significant input as well as community activism opportunities to make self-determination what we want it to be in our communities. An independent facilitator, that's me. It's someone who helps individuals inside of self-determination, as well as helps individuals transition into self-determination. But an independent facilitator can do a broad array of things, including some of the advocacy advocacy roles that I had mentioned in my introduction of myself, as well as finding staff members and putting together novel programs and systems, whatever the individual needs, really. It's kind of like a connector. Okay, a financial management service. I kind of have hinted at that an individual doesn't have to use vendored agencies anymore. And there's just one caveat to that. Every self-determination participant does need to have a financial management service. And that's because although all of the services and supports that an individual receives will be translated essentially into a giant budget that person will choose how to spend over the course of a year, the money isn't exactly airdropped onto your front lawn. Instead, the finances are basically handed over to a financial management service, which operates according to your direction and pays different service providers, be it a traditional vendored service like ABA therapy or a piano teacher down the street, the agreed upon funds that you want to pay them for the services that they're providing. They also handle, if you're going to hire someone directly, such as a personal care attendant, things like HR considerations, legal, payroll considerations, and withholding taxes and unemployment insurance and things of that nature. So the FMS is a very useful service and is indeed the one vendored service provider that a self-determination participant is required to have. And then two major agencies, and I know there are many other agencies that I could mention here that are just important to keep in mind, that are considered what we call generic services, or services that will pay for something before a regional center will. One is Medi-Cal. Many of you might be familiar with Medi-Cal or Medicaid. And Medi-Cal in particular is California's public health insurance program. Medi-Cal often serves many regional center clients and is often a factor in determining whether or not something is going to come out of a self-determination budget or whether another agency needs to provide for that. And then in-home support services, IHSS is the last one you see there, is another major agency that comes into play if staffing is a major consideration, if support personnel are needed in your home or in the community with you. IHSS is often leaned on as one of the major agencies to augment what it is that regional centers provide. Okay, we slogged through it. That is all of the definitions that I will bore you with. But again, if you want to go to that web link, bit.ly/SD definitions, you can continue to sort of reference that for yourself as we go through the rest of this presentation. So up next, I am going to tell you what regional centers are supposed to do, what it is the Lanterman Act, the law underpinning all of this, tells regional centers they're obligated to do. I'm going to describe what regional centers often actually do, which is their best attempt at meeting the provisions of the Lanterman Act, but sometimes falling short. And then I'm going to talk to you about how self-determination can help address this difference, the difference between what regional centers are theoretically supposed to provide and what regional centers end up actually providing. And then to characterize that, I'm going to give you three hypothetical individuals who aren't getting what they really need until they start the self-determination program. So before I do this, actually, I'm going to back up. I just wanted to stop and see if there are any questions so far. I know that a lot of this was just sort of laying a base, but if anybody has any preliminary questions about some of these definitions or about what it is we're talking about right now, maybe just take a minute or two. Is there anything, Pip or anybody?
Yeah, there's one question, not so much about definitions, but Liliana's asking, under the co-employment model, if we hire a childcare person full-time, will they have health benefits?
if you hire a healthcare a care worker full-time, they will have some provision of healthcare benefits. But frequently, I'll put it this way, frequently, the participant needs to make a decision about how generous those healthcare benefits are. So that is that's a really good question, and something that's a little bit emerging with the financial management service systems that are in place in terms of how the financial compensation is worked out to pay for some form of healthcare. The short answer is yes. The longer answer is it's often not quite enough, and that needs to be a consideration when making decisions about how much money to project when hiring somebody.
Okay. And Chris, somebody's asking, who pays for the FMS?
The individual needs to pay for the FMS, and so that is an important consideration. If an individual or a family member uses very little in the way of a regional center, and they truly believe that that's correct, that they don't really need almost anything that the regional center has to offer, and consequently, the budget that they are going to end up with is very low compared to other regional center clients on average across California. The expense of the FMS is paid for from those dollars, from that individual's budget. And so sometimes the trade-off for paying for that isn't really worth it. It's rare, and you might not be receiving a lot of regional center services right now, but you think you maybe could benefit more from it. So I would encourage you, if you feel that way, to kind of stick with us here. But if you conclusively feel like this is not, the regional center is not something that I really need much of at all, the transition to self-determination just might not be the right kind of program for you, because such a big percentage of your small budget then would be taken up paying for the financial management service, which ranges between $50 and $165 per month. So that is a consideration.
Okay. Chris, there are a lot of questions, but I think that if you move on and we'll see if we've got time at the end to answer more of them. Otherwise, I would like to email them to you if we run out of time, and then perhaps you can answer them in an email and I can send them out to everybody.
Perfect. Yeah, and
Okay.
that's the way we did that last year. So if you have
Yeah.
a question that isn't answered in the webinar today, please do rest assured I will make sure and get an answer to you.
Yeah, and I'm hoping we'll have time at the end too. But okay, why don't you move on ahead, Chris, and I'll be saving these questions for later.
That sounds good. Okay, so regional centers and the regional center service delivery model that we have today, in theory, is all guided by the Lanterman Act, which was passed in 1977. And it provides for an array of services and supports to meet the needs and choices of each person who is developmentally disabled in California. You can see how that language is so broad and so deep, because what an individual chooses in their life could be almost anything. And the services and supports that they might need to make that choice happen in their life can be equally broad and deep. And regional centers are tasked with providing for all of this. They do this by contracting with different companies in different categories. So some companies are respite companies, or other companies might provide supported living for those who are living independently. Regional centers will contract with medical providers with durable medical equipment providers, specialized wheelchairs and ramps, and just about anything you can think of to meet the needs and choices of each person who's developmentally disabled in California. The regional center model was established as a means of enacting the Lanterman Act. So regional centers are actually not government bodies. They're nonprofit organizations. They're community-based regional centers that are tasked with providing services to all developmentally disabled people in their radius in the way that I've just described. So these agencies, these regional centers, they manage individual cases. And if you're familiar with the regional center process, this looks like case management. Service coordinators will, often come to your house or now by Zoom and just sort of discuss with you what's going on health-wise, educationally, hopefully dipping into some of your preferences, what you want to do out in the community, what you want to do for work. And then they try and do a pretty comprehensive medical and a medical background history, what's happened lately. And using all of that information, these service coordinators, who are some of the hardest working people I know, but are just overtaxed with their client load, they try and offer an array of services that are going to help meet that individual's support needs. All of these services and supports need to already be vendored or become vendored with that regional center. So the service coordinator needs to both have a comprehensive knowledge base of what's on the menu, what a regional center can offer in terms of what's already been vendored with that regional center, as well as an understanding of how to pair a given support need with an appropriate service that's going to pass muster administratively with their bosses and their bosses' bosses. So it's a challenging process. And it's unsurprising that sometimes people feel underserved by regional centers. Service coordinators may just not know everything that's on the menu. There's nothing that guarantees that they know every service that they can provide. And service coordinators are time starved. They're strapped for time. And the hour that they give to you may not necessarily touch on everything that's challenging in your life. You might not feel as heard as you want to be. So in theory, regional centers are responsive to the needs and choices of all developmentally disabled people. But in reality, regional centers are powerful. They often tell clients what they can get. And if you're not deeply involved in the welfare and institutions code that underpins all of the services and supports that a regional center has identified historically, you might not know any better yourself. You might have an idea that you need something in your life or your loved one's life to help support and make that life better, but you may not necessarily know that the regional center is the place to ask for that. It is. Regional centers are supposed to be the end-all be-all for comprehensive support in a developmentally disabled person's life. Other agencies provide support first, and if they do, great. Special education, and I mentioned Medi-Cal and Medicaid, IHSS and CCS and other agencies, they all do come first. But ultimately, if there's something missing related to a life of your preference and a disability you have that needs support in some way, ultimately the regional center needs to find a solution for that. And they don't. They often just hand you a rather generic array of services. So number 2 here, they're supposed to provide an array of specialized services and supports that meet your specific needs. But that is really difficult to do. So instead, the array of services often becomes a somewhat limited menu of vendors. And if you're a client, or if your loved one is a client of a regional center, you probably are familiar with most of these limited menu items, such as ABA therapy, respite care, personal care attendance, and supported and independent living services, as well as some modest array of durable medical equipment. But there are actually no limits as to what a regional center theoretically ought to be providing to individuals. It ought to be specialized to their preferences. Lastly, regional centers are supposed to involve choice and inclusion of the individual's input, respect for their independence, maximizing their independence in the community and in their home, and just a general respect for their preferences about their life. But again, due to no fault of the service coordinator in front of you, all that regional centers usually have time to do, and the energy and the resources to do, is to address the biggest and most general version of the disability that you have. They're going to talk about you in terms of your disability. The disability is emphasized in the IPP, and things like, I want to take a watercoloring class, or I would prefer that my physical therapy be instead just me spending time at a swim class at the local rec center. These sorts of things, for various reasons, are de-emphasized. The choice and the inclusion of your vision for your life becomes secondary to a general description of your disability and the sort of round hole, square peg version of the service or support that they have in place that they can offer to you to help try and support your needs there. Okay, so that was a lot of information and maybe a bit abstract. So I did this last year. I have 3 hypothetical people. I'm going to introduce them to you, and I'm going to talk about how the traditional regional center model would try and meet their needs. And this is just an example. It might not be how every regional center responds to these individuals, but it is a pretty decent estimation of what might happen for these 3 individuals who are potential regional center clients. So I hope this is helpful. And then I'm going to talk about what self-determination options might be available to these individuals and how services and supports might change if they opt in for the self-determination program. So here we have Shannon, who wants to take an art class, or who wants to take an art class in order to further her passion in art. But Shannon needs a teacher to adapt traditional art implements and methods. She can't hold traditional paintbrushes due to her disability, and she needs support with the sorts of physical apparatuses necessary to support her in her artistic passion. Okay, here we have Jerome. Jerome is interested in fitness, but he can't fully participate in traditional classes at his local gym. And I'll explain why in a minute. And then we have Claudia, whose favorite thing in the whole world is to go to a nearby coffee shop, get coffee, and just sort of experience the coffee shop ambiance. But actually, Claudia, due to her disabilities, is quite overwhelmed by the whole process of getting there herself, of managing the money, and of the necessary transactional social interactions that are involved in getting to the front of the line and ordering the coffee and standing in the right place and saying the right things. All of these things overwhelm Claudia, even though that's what she aspires for. That's what she wants as a part of her week. And so Claudia needs a social coach to help train her how to interact with strangers and give her that reassurance on the bus and inside the coffee shop. Okay, so these are our 3 regional center clients. Now, how would the regional center help address these 3 challenges? Remember, we're looking for the services and supports to meet the needs and choices of each person. So these are 3 individual sets of circumstances. And how would a regional center react to this? Okay, so we have Shannon, the art student. So if there are vendors in the area that offer adaptive equipment, adaptive artistic equipment, which I kind of doubt, the regional center could offer that. So they could make an adaptive equipment request and sign a purchase of service so that Shannon could go ahead and order that equipment. A sort of off the wall a suggestion that it wouldn't surprise me for a regional center to make would be to offer respite to help Shannon's family members or friends, her caretakers, take her to the art class and help her in the class. Regional centers often offer respite as a sort of a coverall to help allow individual family members and friends, the natural supports in someone's life, take over some of the professional supports that maybe or maybe not would be more ideally in place. As we all know, it's exhausting to caregive for someone with a developmental disability. And historically, the state of California has recognized that caregiver burnout has resulted in regional center clients being forced to live in more restrictive settings. Maybe they can't live at home anymore. Maybe they need to move to a group home, or maybe from a group home to a more institutionalized setting. And rightfully, the state of California and all of us, we don't want that. We want individuals to be able to be in their preferred home and to be maximally included in their community with the supports they need. But when those supports don't exist and the family members have to step in to play that role, maybe respite can help and help relieve the burden of that individual later. And then a regional center might be able to provide a one-to-one aid in the class. Maybe that's going to be the answer. What about Jerome? So Jerome's a fitness enthusiast, but he can't get to his class himself. He has a hard time physically navigating the class. Perhaps he's in a wheelchair or something that makes it challenging for him to navigate the actual physical setting. Or it might be the challenge of him being able to get up and participate in a class, a fitness class of some sort, or to utilize the weights or other equipment that are at the gym. So maybe a one-to-one aid can help. That might be the answer. Maybe not. Jerome has to, of course, go all the way to the gym. And all we've identified right now is that Jerome is interested in fitness. He doesn't necessarily even need a gym. But if he has the gym in place, maybe the aid assisting him there would be helpful with that. And then another suggestion, often frequently suggested, would be alternative programs or camps. These would be maybe called out-of-home respite, if you're familiar with that term. But there might be the different environments that are vendored with the regional center that can be offered that are more inclusive and able to accommodate Jerome's needs. And now we have Claudia, trying to get out in the community more and go to her favorite coffee shop. Well, anybody that has challenges interacting in their social environment will probably either have as a part of their insurance or be offered by the regional center ABA therapy. If you're not familiar with ABA therapy, it's behavioral therapy, it's behavioral training. And ABA therapy can be helpful for some people to overcome challenges they have with environments that are very challenging for them. So maybe some ABA therapy will help Claudia. But we're really talking about anxiety and things that are very challenging for Claudia that aren't exactly addressed by ABA therapy. It may help, it may not. Maybe the problem that Claudia is having is communicating. So maybe the offer of a communication board or a device, an AAC device, maybe that's going to be the ticket. Maybe that's going to let her go out in the community and interact with others in a way that's comfortable for her and allows her to be successful doing that. And then again, of course, respite for her family. Maybe her family fills in. Her family's exhausted. They have jobs and they have personal ambitions and they have social lives of their own, but maybe they stop or slow down some of that so that they can take Claudia to the coffee shop every day or every week when she wants to go. And so maybe they get exhausted, but that the regional center can offer that Claudia and that family member respite so that later on the family member can go and take that break, do that load of laundry or whatever it is they were hoping to do during that time. Okay, so these are some things that regional centers can offer. It's not bad, but it's not exactly right on either. Where is the art specific, the art student specific supports? Where are the supports for an individual who just wants to lift some weights and work out in their home, or just get fit? And then what about Claudia? What would support Claudia best? It's going to depend on Claudia, Shannon, and Jerome. But what if with Shannon, instead of having her to trek over to the art class in question, or have her have to be on a wait list for durable medical equipment or something else that isn't exactly tailored to her specific needs, she's able to hire an art teacher that's able to meet her specific needs. Maybe the art teacher will come to her, or maybe she'll go to the art teacher, whatever her preference is. And then what if Shannon could just purchase exactly the specialized art equipment that exists, the wide world of specialized equipment that exists out there, not all available from the regional center, but under self-determination, she could identify that equipment. If she's able to find it, she'd be able to buy it. So if she's able to find the right teacher and find the right equipment, that's pretty much the answer. And you can see how that's similar, but not the same as what traditional regional centers offer. For Jerome, instead of having Jerome go all the way to a gym and then bring an aide with him all the way there to go through that headache and the time it takes to get there and back, instead of offering some off the wall, out of home respite, maybe fitness-based camp a couple times a year, what if Jerome could just hire a personal trainer who can come to his home and work with him and meet his fitness goals? Under self-determination, that's a possibility. And then we have Claudia. Now, Claudia maybe would benefit from ABA therapy. And I kind of gave it away at the intro, but what if she could just hire a social coach, which would be a little bit different, someone that can help her figure out her environment, help her learn the routines she needs to learn to feel confident, to be able to go to the coffee shop or wherever else she wants to go, to help her navigate social interactions, kind of be her wingman, her wing person that can help her chat with people at the coffee shop, strike up conversations, make friends, and ultimately is someone that can help her become more independent in doing the sorts of things she wants to do out in the community. So instead of relying on these traditional service categories, which sometimes fit the bill and sometimes don't, self-determination allows Shannon, Jerome, and Claudia to get right at exactly what it is they want in their life and to recruit and staff those people, find that equipment that's going to exactly meet their specialized needs. In other words, self-determination allows for that individual choice and that specialized array of services that we'd mentioned, which is at the heart of the Lanterman Act. So this is why the self-determination program can sometimes be viewed as sort of the next stage of the Lanterman Act, and instantiating that law better in practice. So in summary here, self-determination addresses some typical challenges. Individuals under self-determination are responsible for finding the support they prefer to have in their life. That's that responsibility piece. If you're going into self-determination, you're not necessarily going to have someone offer you a menu of items. You have to identify what it is you need, and you have to go out and find it with the support people in your lives helping you. So team members that help you can be family members or friends, neighbors, independent facilitators like me, other businesses or vendors, but the vendor requirements disappear. So basically, if you can find it, you can fund it. If it supports your needs and shows up in an individual plan that you help write, known as a person-centered plan, then you can get that support in your life. On some level, it's simple. It's what we all want for our lives, which is just to look at the wide world around us and try and find what it is that's going to best meet our needs and pay for it. And on that note, the participant is in charge of their own budget. So this is a really big change from the traditional service model. You're in charge of your own budget and a spending plan, which is a plan for how you will spend that budget. So this is how self-determination addresses the typical regional center challenges that we experience. Okay, so that's kind of an introduction to self-determination and how it's different from traditional regional center services. And some okay examples, some hypothetical examples for why self-determination might be a better fit for somebody than the traditional model. In a minute, I'm going to talk about why self-determination might not be a good idea for you, why you might not want to participate in this program. I'm going to talk about some requirements that you need in order to transition into the self-determination program. It's kind of a big process, so you need to think it through. I'm going to talk to you about what I consider a pretty vital role, which is the independent facilitator. A lot of folks like me are often your primary advocate in transitioning into the system. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how independent facilitators can help, and then how you can get started. This program a year ago when I introduced it was still in the phase-in. There were still only 2,500 people that were lottery selected to participate in this program. But come June 7th, in less than a month, everybody in every regional center client in the state of California is going to be eligible to participate in this program. So, and then we'll conclude. But any questions so far that we have about some of what we've covered?
There are lots of questions, and they're wonderful questions, but we only have another 3 minutes left. And I'm wondering, would you be willing to go on for another 10 minutes? If people are able, our attendees are able to stay on for another 10 minutes, would that work for you?
Of course, yes.
To go through your next 4 points especially, and then, as I said, I am saving all these questions to send to you after the webinar.
Yeah, well, I've not been watching my clock as I've been talking. It's the balance of speeding up versus slowing down.
I know, and thank you so much for slowing down. I mean, it's wonderful. People are saying how clear you are, clear and calm. You're a wonderful, wonderful presenter. So let's keep going, and I will send the questions to you at another time,
you bet.
Tomorrow morning. Okay, thank you.
All right, so next up here really quickly, self-determination, it is a lot of work, and self-determination might not be for everyone. If you're happy with your regional center services and you don't want to make changes, I don't really recommend self-determination to you. There is a lot more responsibility that sits with you or with your loved one to move into self-determination. The team, everybody that's supporting that person, usually need to create some kind of person-centered plan. It's a big piece of the process. It's not required, but it's very helpful. There's no menu of goods and services that are going to be offered to you. So you're going to have to go through the headache, the process of hunting and pecking and looking and constructing a program that maybe works for you. You can, of course, use traditional vendored services, and many people enter self-determination doing that. But if that's exactly what you want is those vendored services, then the move to self-determination wasn't really necessary for you. Usually you have an idea about something different that you want, and finding that is a big job. You're going to be a manager. You're going to be the boss. If I were your independent facilitator, you'd have to choose whether you wanted to hire me or fire me, as well as anybody who supports you in your home. The personal care attendants or supported living people in your life. You become the manager of that process, including management of including finding new people to replace. So you have to manage a budget. You have to stay within your budget. You can run out of money, in which case you wouldn't have the money to pay for the services you need. So you do this in conjunction with a financial management service. So you have some help. You always have the support you choose to want in your life, you choose for your life, but you're ultimately responsible for that. And that is no small headache. And then just like with traditional regional centers, you still have to advocate for traditional services first. If something can be covered by special ed or Medi-Cal, IHSS, or even a local community service like a free rec program, those have to be exercised before you can use regional center self-determination program funds. So that's just an important consideration. And as I mentioned before, the budget has to be large enough to accommodate financial management services and other paid assistance, like someone like an independent facilitator. So if you have a very small budget and you think that that's appropriate for your needs, the self-determination program might not be for you. So with all of that headache, you're allowed to get all the support you want. One of the key principles of self-determination is that you can involve any family member, friends, church, community supporters, or independent facilitators like me, which is someone who's formally trained by the State Council on Developmental Disabilities to provide support to self-determination participants. You can get assistance in any aspect of this program that you find challenging or cumbersome or that you don't want to do. But all of that is paid out of the regional center, the self-determination participants budget. So you have to make those considerations, what you want help with versus what you want to do yourself. And then if I wasn't too much of a downer, I hope that my upside here is encouraging to those of you, because I think a lot of us would benefit from this program. I'm an optimist about the self-determination program. You end up with an individualized strengths and vision-based approach to planning your life, to planning your loved one's life, and maximizing that individual's choice and inclusion in what they want for their life going forward. So I'll quickly run through an independent facilitator. Again, I said it's someone trained by the State Council on Developmental Disabilities to provide support to self-determination participants. I've described my role as sometimes a bit of a connector role, finding supports that meet the needs of an individual. But in IF, an independent facilitator can do lots of different things, and I often advocate for generic services in my capacity as an independent facilitator. So I've gone to IEP meetings and IPP meetings and helped fill out Medi-Cal paperwork, and even showed up at IHSS appeals meetings to advocate for more hours. So an IF like me is paid out of the self-determination budget. So it's a consideration. And part of what I do as an independent facilitator is help advocate for the size of that budget so that you can afford all of the services and supports you want in your life, including myself or someone like me, if that's what you want. So how do you get started in self-determination? If you're interested in this, you want to do this, the first thing you need to do is you need to contact your regional center about attending an orientation. An orientation is a mandatory first step to participating in self-determination. And although there are lots of recommended steps that I, as an independent facilitator, will make to you if you want to move forward in the process, I'm going through some of the mandatory steps. So attending an orientation is one thing. And finding a financial management service, it's not a very challenging process because they're all published on the Department of Developmental Services website. But you do need to choose an FMS and go through the rigmarole of the paperwork and everything. And the financial management service has to perform background checks and qualify each service provider that you're going to be hiring directly. There are 3 models of financial management services, which we won't really have time to go into today, but knowing that these are options for you is going to be really important. If you're going to hire people directly to support you in your life, you're going to want either the sole employer or the co-employer model. If you're not, the bill payer model that you see there, the FMS as bill payer, is cheaper. So these all have different rates. You're going to have to sign off on a certified budget that the regional center and you will work together to create. And sometimes that process can be a real pain in the neck. It requires sometimes quite a bit of advocacy to point out that you need certain things that should be built into that budget. And then you're going to have to write a spending plan that matches what that budget number is. And you're going to have to stick to it or tweak it and edit it through the course of the year. So there's some flexibility to move money around, but you have to stay on top of that and you have to be responsible for it. So those are the requirements of a self-determination client or participant. You talk to your services coordinator at your local regional center about attending an orientation. Because this program is opening up in June and we're expecting a more than 120-fold increase in people potentially participating in this program, I'm anticipating a bit of a flood. And so if you are interested in someone like myself supporting you, an independent facilitator, find someone who either works in your area or contact local state council of developmental disabilities, local advisory committee meetings, which occur at each regional center, and ask them who is serving as an independent facilitator in your area. I know we're out of time. We do have a change.org petition. I and 200 other independent facilitators that I'd encourage you, if you have time, to copy and paste this link, or, well, you can't really copy and paste it, but that there have been provisions made to the lottery participants, the people that have been in this program up to this date, that aren't necessarily going to be available to individuals after the program rolls out. And we have been advocating at the state level to make sure that these resources are available to all participants after the rollout, because we believe that that's an equitability issue, that individuals need to have the financial resources to support them in the transition into self-determination. So that gets a little wonky and detailed, but if you're interested in some public advocacy work, we have been working very hard to try and make sure that this program is very accessible to everybody who wants to participate in it in California. So
I just pasted that link into the chat for everybody.
Thank you. Yeah, so read through that. And if you have questions after all of this, you can contact me. My email is there, and my website is there, and I can answer any questions later. And as Pip mentioned, the questions that you've asked up to now, she's logging, and I will answer you personally after this webinar to the best of my ability, or connect you with someone who can. So I hope this presentation was helpful, and I am apologetic that we're a little long, but if there is time for questions, I'm happy to take them now. Should I stop sharing my screen, Pip, or?
Oh, just keeping that up is really helpful, actually, Chris, so people can take time to get your email down. There are so many, everybody, there's a lot coming into the chat saying thank you so much. It was excellent presentation, wonderful. And there's so many questions. I really think the way to be able to handle this best is to send them to you, and for you to be able to answer as best you can. And then we'll send them your responses out to everybody that's attended. I can't thank you enough, Chris. I can't thank you enough.
My pleasure. Yeah. I mean, everybody, I think we said there something like 300 and something attendees. So
yeah, we had 138
138
on.
who showed up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know,
Yeah,
as I said, it's going to be archived. So I imagine a lot of people that couldn't make it will attend, you know, will go to the archived recording.
Yeah, so I know it's a lot of information. I'm sorry there wasn't enough time for a lot of Q&A, but because there are so many of you, it was going to be a challenge to answer all of your questions right now. But like I said, I do promise to answer them later. So if you want to ask me by email, if you think of something, please do. And if I get a question from Pip that came from you, I will answer you directly as well. Okay, everyone.
Thank you, Chris.
And a quick reminder as well that I posted the slides in all 3 languages into the chat several times, and we'll send the recording and slides and answers to the questions out to everybody who's registered for this webinar as well.
Thank you again, Chris. And thanks everybody for joining us today. Appreciate your time. Bye-bye.